really different. Hey, it's Jay. This is Plasma Channel. Now, although rather poorly, water conducts electricity. This is not new news. But unlike copper wire, it can flow, it can crash, it can change shape altogether, and it can be moved and removed entirely using nothing but valves. When it comes to water use in our society, we pretty much use it for two things: cleaning and consumption. But I think we're completely overlooking another use that's entirely different. Hey, it's Jay. This is Plasma Channel. Now, although rather poorly, water conducts electricity. This is not new news. But unlike copper wire, it can flow, it can crash, it can change shape altogether, and it can be moved and removed entirely using nothing but valves. Think about that for a second. So I pose the question, is it plausible that we can use water as a controlled medium to transfer electrical power? More specifically, to transmit wireless power, a bit like Wi-Fi, to nearby devices. I know, totally mental, and it sounds like I've been huffing just a little bit too much ozone off the big Genesis over there, but this video truly is just an exploration into that possibility. Here's why that's not actually crazy. Shooting my last video on ozone sterilization, I noticed something wicked cool. You see, this device utilizes a water-filled plate attached to high voltage to capacitively couple energy to nearby objects. That's why you see the purple streaks and this purple corona next to my skin. It's pretty cool. Now, when I brought any light sources near the plate, they lit up. Light bulbs, fluorescent tubes, neon lights, the gamut. So, in essence, the sheet of water acted as a wireless power transmitter itself. Pretty crazy stuff. Seeing them light up essentially showed that the idea of spreading wireless power using water may not be that crazy after all. And considering water takes on any shape that you want it to, you might as well put it into a pipe and treat that pipe like a wire. You see where I'm going? So today I've got a couple lengths of acrylic tubing that I'm going to go ahead and cut up, do some work on, and here's the plan. I've gone ahead and built a simple water distribution system using a reservoir, acrylic pipes, and plastic valves. The reservoir is attached electrically to a high voltage, high frequency power source, and there are various light bulbs near the distal ends. Notice they're not attached. I plan to test this system to see if water can be used to distribute electrical power in controlled locations, whether it be through wireless power or direct connection. I added copper end caps to allow for that direct connection. Now there's two separate valves to control each of the two halves. The left side will have two lights, and the right side will be a bit further away with one single light. My ultimate goal is to be able to turn on and off each set of lights individually using those valves. Before we go any further, a quick note about safety. You like living, right? Me too. That means we have something in common, so let's leave the combining of water and high voltage to the professional idiots like this guy. Don't do this at home. Right, with the power source attached and opening the left valve, we've got light. Not sure why it flickers though, but closing the valve, it mostly turns off. On, off, on, off. And leaving the valve open but varying the power instead, both lights can be wirelessly dimmed. Opening the valve on the right side, and we've got light from the fluorescent tube. Looks like it's a bit too close. Closing the valve, no light. Light, no light. Notice these lights in the background, they remained on because their separate valve is still open. Now with both valves open, all the lights can be wirelessly dimmed at the same time. Pretty cool. Like before, this is through varying the power. But direct connection provides the most power, so this light bulb is directly attached to the copper end cap, and you can see just how hot those arcs are. When I touch it, the lights dim because most of the energy leaks out of the system, goes through my fingers and into ground. All right, so it works. You just saw a wireless power distribution system using nothing but water, pipes, and valves. I think that's really, really cool. Now, one of the things that really surprises me is just how effective this wireless power is at a distance. Check this out. Sitting on the table about a foot away is a larger fluorescent tube. You can see just how much bigger this one is. Well, up close, it's super bright, but it still lights up about 6, 7, 8 feet away. I honestly was a bit shocked because I didn't expect it to go out that far. I expected a couple of feet. I can't emphasize enough how cool this is in person, and it should be obvious by now that this system, it has some potential. But you might be asking, okay, well, what's the physics behind this? How is this wireless power transfer happening? Well, those of you who have followed my channel for a while might be familiar with the term capacitive coupling. Look, you'd have to be a soulless Susie to not find this interesting. So check this out. This plasma globe is turned off, yet it's still lit, still functioning. How is that? because capacitive coupling is the transfer of AC electricity between two physically unconnected circuits, primarily due to induced currents. The high voltage AC in the water is inducing a current in the plasma globe. But this type of energy transfer degrades with distance pretty quickly though, and its strength at any given distance can be predicted using the inverse square law. Wicked cool, right? That's the science behind how the system transfers energy to nearby devices, and because of the piping system, the wireless power can be directed. Now, keeping in mind this is a fully hypothetical system, here's a couple of uses I do see this being applicable for. Selective wireless power. Whether in a large room or individual spots throughout a park, turning a handle would allow localized wireless charging. Functional Zen. Imagine an outdoor cafe that has an aqueduct of water running right through the middle of it, and the water radiates wireless power to all the tables. I'd call it Capacitance Cafe, and all the customers would be nerds. Being realistic, this system has tons of flaws, to include dangerous voltages and exploding water pipes, so yeah, it's really just a novelty. However, since nobody has used plastic valves and acrylic pipes to transfer wireless power before, this is a new method, so I dub it Bowls Transmission. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this video and it got some gears turning. I'd love to know your thoughts on the whole project, so leave a comment down below. In particular, I want to know your thoughts on why you think those two fluorescent tubes on the left-hand side stayed slightly lit despite turning the valve off. I know the answer, but I want to hear your thoughts. Also, thank you to everybody who chooses to support my work through Patreon. You make a huge difference. So if you'd like to encourage longer, more frequent uploads, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks a bunch. Plasma Channel out. Thanks for stopping by, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to Plasma Channel. Check us out on other social media, and feel free to check out our various other episodes. With science every 2 weeks, you stay classy.
George, I'm not sure.
So in this setup, I just have circular electrodes with an outer and an inner electrode, so that it just makes the gallium flow. Hydrodynamic drive, and showing you how it actually works. So magnetohydrodynamics is something that has been popularized in a lot of fictional films. For example, in The Hunt for Red October, they make a submarine that's driven by magnetohydrodynamics. Now let me show you what this actually means. So whenever you move an electric charge through a magnetic field, it causes that electric charge to curve. And you can make use of that. In fact, that's the way that modern motors work. Electric motors work by passing current through a wire that's in a magnetic field, and it causes a force on that wire. You can make a really simple motor like this, but the motors work by using electrons in a solid metal. But what if you don't want to use electrons in a metal? Well, you can actually use ions in water. For example, I have my giant neodymium magnet below here that's going to supply a really strong magnetic field. And then I just have 2 bars of aluminum that I'm going to connect to some power. Now, normal water doesn't have a lot of ions in it. There's only a small amount of hydroxide ions and hydrogen ions in there. However, even though it's only a small amount, watch what happens when I turn on my power. So when I turn on the power, it's going to cause the hydroxide ions to move to the positive electrode and the H+ ions to move to the negative electrode. And so there's going to be a flow of charge. And what that causes is the ions to move at right angles to the direction of the electric current. So without any moving parts here, we can actually get water to slightly flow. But the real interesting part happens is when we actually put more ions in the water, we can actually get a higher electric current to go through it because we have more ions in there. So now watch what happens when we have salty water. Well, look how fast it's flowing. So there's absolutely no moving parts here, and the water's just flowing as if there's a pump pushing it, but there's no pump whatsoever. So this is called magnetohydrodynamics. Now, the amount of water flow is dependent on the strength of the magnetic field and also the strength of the electric field. So the closer you move your electrodes, the higher the current's going to be, and so the faster the water flow is going to be. So if you move them really close together, you can really get that water to shoot through there. Okay, now let's move them even closer together and see how fast we can actually get this. So this is so cool. With no moving parts whatsoever, you can just shoot water through a channel. I can adjust the speed of it by adjusting the amperage here. Turn it down. The water flows down. Turn it up. Speeds up. So although we are getting the water to move, it's not moving the water very efficiently. You can see that a lot of energy is lost into making these bubbles on the electrodes. Now these are actually bubbles of hydrogen and oxygen forming here. And actually, because we have a chloride ion in the water, it's actually making chlorine gas as well. And you can actually get the flow of the liquid to change directions depending on how you switch the electrodes. So if I switch the positive and negative, the water will flow in a different direction. So the cool thing about this is you don't just have to use water, you can put any conductive liquid in there. So even if I put liquid gallium in there, it should shoot the liquid gallium through the channel there. Okay, let's try it with the liquid gallium. See what happens here. Whoa. There we go. So the gallium is way more dense, so it's harder to get it to flow through there. Now you can do this a lot easier if you just get the gallium to flow in a circle. So in this setup, I just have circular electrodes with an outer and an inner electrode so that it just makes the gallium flow in a circle. Now in this setup that I've shown here, my magnet is below the water. But to make something that actually is driven by this force, you need to put your magnet on the thing that's floating in the water. So all I have here is a 9-volt battery connected to my 2 electrodes here. And then I have my magnet covered in tape in the center here. It's a little boat that can float in the water. So when I put it under the water, the electrodes now work, and it shoots water out the back here and propels it forward. Start at the back, and it moves forward. Let's put it in the bathtub so you can see it move a little bit better. So you can see in this magnetohydrodynamic drive here that it's not very efficient because it's creating all these bubbles that are using the energy not to propel it forward, but just to make these gas bubbles. So for this reason and the reason that you're limited by how much current you can flow through it, and if you're going to use it in seawater or something, there's not been very many large mock-ups of a magnetohydrodynamic drive. They're not very efficient, they don't work very well, but they do work. And the cool thing is you don't just have to use them on liquid, you can use them on gases too that are ionic. So there's actually potential to use plasma propulsion engines that use the same principle here. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Remember, if you haven't checked out theactionlab.com, I have 2 experiment boxes for sale there, a vacuum chamber box and a self-pouring fluid box that's really cool. So check out theactionlab.com. These boxes make a great holiday gift if you haven't bought anything for someone that's interested in science or engineering. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and hit the bell to be notified when I release my latest video. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
These things.
Hundreds of years ago, a young scientist and adventurer named Charles Darwin was sailing on the Beagle, dozens of miles offshore, when he noticed something strange was happening. I am sure that a few days ago there were none of these spiders on the ship, and now there are so many of them. It must be one of those species that is able to fly using air currents, or perhaps by means of electrical charges. More than 2 centuries ago, these flying spider species were already known, and scientists discussed their theories on how a spider could fly without wings. Unfortunately, they lacked the tools to test these theories. By making observations on the ground, they realized that these flying spiders, of which several species are known, including Aragon dentipalpus, had a similar behavior. They would look for a high place, do a little dance, and fly away. This process is known as ballooning. A more detailed analysis allowed the scientists to realize that, before flying away, the spider performed the following ritual. It would stick to the ground using a spider web as a safety rope. Then, it raised its abdomen and released more webs, which remained suspended in the air. And finally, after they were long enough, the safety web was cut and the spider flew away. With that information alone, if we compare the spider to a dandelion seed, we could theorize that what the spider is doing is increasing its resistance to the wind so that the wind will carry it away. So far so great for our theory of flying with the help of the wind, but there were several problems with it. The spiders were able to take off even with very light winds. There were larger spiders that should have had difficulty being swept through the air, but still managed to soar. And perhaps the biggest contradiction of all was that the takeoff speed was often even greater than the wind speed. The way to explain this behavior was by considering the interaction of electric charges. Electric charges, which can be positive or negative, are attracted by their opposite charge and repelled by their own. Following this principle, it was possible that the spider used this repulsive force to fly away. But how? Where did these charges come from, and how did the spider control them? At first glance, it would seem that this theory leaves us with more questions than answers. The key information here, to decipher the mystery, is that both the ground and the surrounding atmosphere can be electrically charged. It may be hard to imagine or to remember that these electrical charges are there, since we usually are not able to see them. But think of a battery. We know that it has a positive pole and a negative pole. We also know that trying to directly connect the two poles creates a short circuit and creates a spark. This spark is created because the negatively charged electrons are attracted to the positive pole of the battery, because there is a potential difference or voltage and reach a point where they are so close, but without making contact, that they manage to move through the air by a process known as ionization. Now think of a thunderstorm. The lightning would be analogous to the spark of the battery, and therefore, doing a little reverse engineering, we will realize that for these to be generated there must be a potential difference between the ground and the atmosphere. This potential difference is not always large enough to produce lightning. But the charges are there, so don't forget it. Let's reanalyze the situation. With this new information, let's say that the ground has a negative charge and the atmosphere has a positive charge. Since the spider will be in direct contact with the floor, it will also have a negative charge and, therefore, could be repelled by the floor. Well, not exactly. If it were that easy, all ants and small enough insects would be floating in space. If we analyze the ritual of the spider before flying, we'll realize there is a step that could be giving us a clue, which is the moment when the webs are thrown into the air. At this moment, the webs separate individually, which is quite strange if we do not consider the electrical charges, since there is nothing to prevent them from getting entangled. But when considering the electrical charges, it makes a lot of sense, as each spider web thread will be negatively charged and therefore repel each other, and also at the same time they will be repelled by the charge of the ground as they all have the same polarity. This behavior is exactly the same as what happens to our hair when we rub it with a balloon, because in doing so we are charging it positively while the balloon is negatively charged. In this way, the force of repulsion between the spider and the ground manages to be greater than gravity, and, when we cut the safety web, it's expelled towards the sky. In fact, if we cut paper and bring a balloon that we have just rubbed close to it, the papers will fly away, as will our spider. But it doesn't end here. We still have some unsolved mysteries. Going back to the example of the balloon in our hair, how is it that the spider manages to make its webs behave in a similar way to our hair, but without rubbing against anything? Is it possible that the spider is sensing something that we are unable to see? To solve the last mysteries that we have left regarding the flying spider, again our friend Charles Darwin will help us to understand what is happening. Because during a storm in one of his trips he described the situation as follows. Everything is in flames, the sky with lightning, the water with luminous particles, and even the very masts are pointed with a blue flame. This last sentence refers to a phenomenon known as St. Elmo's fire, which, hundreds of years ago, was considered a sign of good fortune for sailors during a storm. It may sound like fiction, but this phenomenon is real, although technically it was not fire, but electricity. In fact, to this day this phenomenon can be seen in situations where there are large potential differences between an object and the environment. For example, in high-voltage pylons, the Tesla coils, or in the case of St. Elmo's fire, the flagpoles of a ship during a storm. An interesting fact about this phenomenon, known today as the corona discharge effect, is that there are certain areas that are more prone to this occurrence, which generally are pointed locations. And from here on out I will be supported by Erica Morley and Daniel Roberts' scientific paper on how electric fields cause ballooning in spiders, as they finished unraveling these mysteries in 2018. They conducted a series of related tests, and the first of these was to understand how the corona effect is generated in nature. And, as you can see in this simulation, even in a tree, concentrations of electric fields are generated at the tips of the highest branches, which would explain to you why the spiders were looking for high places before they started flying, and also how they became electrically charged without rubbing against anything. And not only that, in this research they were able to demonstrate that by means of small hairs located on the legs, also known as trichobothria, these spiders were able to detect not only air currents, but also electric fields. Since they reacted in a different way depending on the stimulus. And as if that were not enough, in this study they put the spiders in a controlled environment without any air current, but with a controlled electric field, and the spiders managed to initiate flight without problems. Even by alternating the electric field they were able to have the spider levitate indefinitely, proving without any doubt that these spiders were electrically charged in order to fly. And with that we now know everything about how spiders fly. There is only one thing left to add. I give infinite thanks to Guillermo Larios from the Black Squid, who made the 3D model of the Aragon dentipalpus, and who, by the way, has other great works on his website and Instagram. That's all for now, and see you in the next episode.
The urban legends of how the soldiers in Vietnam, using a first-generation night vision goggle system, went crazy because they saw demons. Is that true? Well, read this. Did the first-generation night vision goggles have a red color instead of green? And when the soldiers tested them, did they see demons? Well, yes, that's true, according to Jennifer on Quora. Diasin dye was used, and it was red in color. Soldiers actually said they saw demons while wearing them. It is highly regulated and highly illegal. In quantum physics, there's something called tachyons, which allows particles to be seen that are faster than the speed of light. The particles that were seen as a whole appear to resemble demons in parallel universe. Wow, that's what I'm talking about. What if I told you I might have an experimental pair of Daisyonin goggles? Oh yeah, got them here. We're gonna look at them in a minute. So buckle up, Buttercup. Also, thank you, KetoWithLeak.com. This stuff is awesome. Just put a scoop in your coffee or your favorite beverage or water when you wake up. It's great for energy. It's great to help boost your metabolism. It's an MCT coconut oil mix that helps put your body in the ketogenic state. You've probably heard me talk about my friend overseas that's lost over 70 pounds taking this stuff, working out and eating right. Do you want to lose weight? Do you want to have an optimal prime metabolism, supreme energy? I'm sure you do. Well, get yours today. KetoWithLeak.com. 51% off and free shipping in the US. Yeah, I just got me a pair of Daisyonin Aura goggles. I don't know if you've heard the conspiracy behind the Gen 1 night vision, that supposedly, according to urban legend, when people put them on, they saw demons, and some people even went crazy wearing these things. Well, folks, I'm already crazy, so we don't have to worry about that. And let's see if they actually work. So, you ready? These are them, the Daisyonin goggles, the Aurora goggles. Let's see if they work. Here we go.
What? We own your government. We own your media. We own your politicians. We own your corporations. We own your farms. We own your educations, which we call indoctrination. Don't be alarmed. We know what's best for you. We've been here longer. Don't question my authority.
All right, let's rock and roll, ladies and gentlemen. I want to share with you the information about these Daisyonin Aura goggles. Do they work? Well, I put them on the other day. I started to look at my hand, and I could absolutely see an aura or an energy field around my hand. These have different types of lenses also. I've got several experimental lenses to go with these. I'd like to read a bit to you, and then I'm going to put them on and tell you what I see. All right, here we go. Wait, where should I start, ladies and gentlemen? Why don't I just read this to you, okay? Here we go. The introduction. Most spiritual traditions from around the world acknowledge the existence of an energy field which permeates and surrounds the human body. I'm going to assume that if this book is in your hands, that you probably have more than a passing interest in this phenomenon. I can tell you up front that you've come to the right place, and you now possess one of the most interesting and useful tools available for proving its existence for yourself. In the past, perceiving this energy field was the sole domain of those exceptionally gifted individuals who could rightfully call themselves psychic, clairvoyant, sensitives, or had some talent with energy healing. Back then, this perceptive ability was more nature than nurture. But times have changed. Through techniques, though techniques existed in antiquity to train an individual to interact with this energy field with varying degrees of success, it's only been in the last 100 years that humankind has publicly succeeded in making it visible to just about anyone. In 1908, a British physician by the name of Dr. Walter John Kilner discovered a technique that allowed a layperson to see the energy field without any training or natural ability by using a very specialized set of filtering goggles. In his own words, hardly one person in 10,000 is aware that he or she is surrounded by a haze intimately connected with the body. Whether asleep or awake, whether hot or cold, which, although invisible under ordinary circumstances, can be seen when conditions are favorable. This mist, which is what I saw, the prototype of the halo or nimbus constantly depicted around the saints, has been manifested to certain individuals possessing a specially gifted sight who have received the title of clairvoyance, and until quite recently, to no one else. The cloud or atmosphere, or as it is generally termed, aura, is the subject of this treatise, insofar as it can be perceived by the employment of screens containing a peculiar chemical substance in solution. It may as well be stated at once that we make not the slightest claim to clairvoyancy, nor are we occultists. And we especially desire to impress on our readers that our researchers have been entirely physical and can be repeated by anyone who takes sufficient interest in this subject. As Dr. Kilner emphasizes, he was not an occultist or psychic. He tested this method with hundreds of people and kept meticulous records which were shared openly with other medical professionals. This discovery was not simply a hoax or misunderstanding of optical physics made by an amateur. So how did he accomplish this? The Daisyanin conspiracy. Dr. Kilner specialized in the field that we would today call radiology or medical imaging. He was a professional in every sense of the word, and as a forerunner in this field, spent his career testing and refining new methods to observe and diagnose illness in patients. In that era, medical imaging was quite a bit more rudimentary. X-rays were a recent discovery, and color photography had literally just been developed for wide-scale use. Even the dyes and pigments used for clothing and textiles were in their infancy. Coal tar dye derivatives had just hit the market and had become very popular. This naturally led Dr. Kilner and other researchers to speculate about what would be accomplished using this new palette of colored screens. Many methods were tested, including impregnating thin gelatin lenses with various colors, but these lenses deteriorated quickly with exposure to light and changes in temperature and humidity. Eventually, it was determined that glasses cells filled with the colored liquids provided the best clarity, stability, and light filtering qualities. One pigment called Daisyanin proved to be the most promising. When used in its liquid form, Daisyanin has a purple hue which filters incoming light and shifts human vision to the ultraviolet spectrum. Early tests revealed a previously unseen haze around the body with variations in locations which correlated with ailments in the patient's bodies. Dr. Kilner was naturally intrigued. Over time, Dr. Kilner experimented by using his Daisyanin lenses with many patients and developed a system of medical diagnosis based on his observations of this energetic shell. He published his work within the medical community, where his findings were replicated and validated by many other physicians. News of Daisyanin lenses was spread far and wide in the popular press, where was also found a following among theosophists, spiritualists, and the psychic community of the era. Naturally, these latter esoteric groups began to associate this phenomena with their belief in the aura, and the rest is history. Even in Dr. Kilner's era, Daisyanin was a special order from Germany and rather difficult to obtain. It is a finicky substance and degrades quickly, even in the best of environments. Still, other groups and manufacturers around the world managed to get their hands on this dye and offered similar lenses, which were used and marketed for many years with great success. So what happened? Why did something with such potential simply disappear? That's where things get tricky. Somewhere in the past few decades, Daisyanin was quietly removed from the public availability and is now nearly impossible to find, even with clearance to buy chemicals on an institutional scale. Due to the embargo, Aura goggles themselves all but died out. There hasn't been a real legitimate set of Kilner-style Aura goggles on the market since the 70s. One manufacturer tried to offer a very pricey version around 2010, but after much hype, they basically fell off the face of the earth and nothing has been offered since. In recent years, these facts have been made public and gained somewhat of a cult following in various circles on the internet, because we all know everything's real on the internet. People have been rightly asking if there is a conspiracy to hide this technology due to its ability to allow you to see into parallel worlds you otherwise couldn't see. In our opinion, yes. Chew bubble gum and kick ass. In John Carpenter's 1988 sci-fi cult classic They Live, the main character, John Nada, played the immortal Roddy Piper. Falling into a massive dystopian plot that is nothing short than full-scale takeover of the Earth by space aliens or alien species. That group has silently gained control over all aspects of modern life, including finance, media, business, law enforcement, etc. in the film. The only way to detect them is with special sunglasses, which allow users to see in another spectrum, past the invisible mind control in order to observe reality for what it truly is. Many people have speculated on the seemingly prophetic nature of this movie and whether we are truly living in a version of it ourselves. To that, I'll leave you with the words of the man himself before his very unfortunate and untimely passing. Rest in power, Roddy Piper. They Live as a documentary. I actually remember when he said that, and shortly after, he passed. Now, I just read a comment in the comment section that said he was dealing, I think, with lymphoma. So, you know, I don't know what happened, and it's very unfortunate to say the least, because Roddy Piper is awesome. So, Aura goggles have lately been seen as real-world analog to the sunglasses used by Piper's character, offering the hope of detecting those who may be soulless, drone-like, non-playable characters or under some form of unseen control. Is this possible? I don't know. It's not our intention to convince you of anything, but do yourself a favor. Do as we did. After you've completed the preliminary exercises presented later in this manual, take your goggles out and simply observe. Sit down, relax, see what you see, and let us know. All right, wow. And it talks about the method. Obviously, never look directly at the sun or any bright light source with the goggles on. It could cause irreparable damage to your eyes. You know you're not supposed to look at the sun. Don't be an idiot. All right, now, these goggles, you can see right here, I'm going to put them on. Okay. They're pretty intense. And I can see an energy field around my hands, especially when I move them around and I stare at them for a second, or my body. If I am to look at my body with a mirror in front of me, I can absolutely see an energy field. I can see auras oftentimes without these things. I can see the color hue around the body. This is more of a technological aspect. Like if you fine-tune your eyes and use this properly under the right conditions, you're going to be able to get a lot more out of it. I'll tell you this, when you put them on, it has a purplish hue. It makes everything look purple. Like the sky looks purple. The trees look purple and white. The light here looks purple. The light here looks purplish white, but it definitely changes the hue, obviously. And observing.
That's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, these are wild. Now, when we go back to the original night vision goggles that quickly became illegal, isn't that weird? Like, why? What was their rationale for making that illegal? I would like to find the official reason. And it would be interesting if there's anybody that we could talk to that had a pair of these things or wore a pair of them during Vietnam. If that's, if there's anybody still around we could talk to and get a description of what they look like. Are they really demons? Are they tachyons? Are they some type of entity that literally travels so fast and in a different dimension that we don't see? It is possible because light spectrums and frequencies vary in differing, different degrees, different levels. And just like your ears only pick up certain frequencies, your eyes only pick up certain frequencies. So if you could use technologies to adjust that, you could in theory, absolutely see things that aren't there with regular vision.
I was literally talking.
Wow, these are wild. These are absolutely.
I was literally talking to you on the video.
If you have any information on this conspiracy, I would really like to hear it in the comments section. If you know anybody that has firsthand experience, I'll do some more research into this also. I just wanted to share with you these goggles because they're just super cool. And I'm going to spend some more time doing research with them.
Okay, so
There's also different lenses that it came with. Take a look at these lenses real fast.
Are you comfortable putting it?
Two different sets of lenses. And they weren't cheap either. These were not cheap. Like, I looked on Amazon and checked out a bunch of supposed Aura goggles, and they ranged in price from like $10 to $150. And the people that I talked to, because I know somebody that the person that referred me to these, I need to spend more time with these things on and doing the actual research before I give you a definitive answer on how well they work. Check out our other YouTube channel, Pandora's Box. Let's open it. It's awesome. We decode ancient mythos, read through various scriptures and cuneiform tablets and mythological teachings from the past, and then decode them. Read one yesterday called Lugal Banda and the Anzud bird, which is about 3,500, 4,000 years old. And it describes what I think is a dragon actually fighting the Anunnaki and going after the Anuna gods. It describes that specifically the Anuna gods hide when this Anzud bird comes after them. And the nest of the Anzud bird is described as being built with different woods. And that's why I don't think it's a technology like a spaceship or a solar flare. Although it is interesting because the Anzud bird also likes to drink. So maybe dragons like to drink back in the day. Shape-shifting dragons. Pretty wild. Sounds like something out of a Dungeons and Dragons episode. Be the change you want to see, everybody.
It's Joe. Well,
In Washington, we met with an engineer and researcher named John Cadman. John has created a scale model replica of the subterranean chamber pulse generator under the Great Pyramid of Giza. This is an incredibly important discovery to understand because it can be the first proof of concept regarding ancient technology. This discovery may give us great insight into the ways of the ancient past. What would something like this have been used for? How did and why did they create something like this? The questions may be endless. Hopefully, we have not lost touch too much to understand the importance of this discovery.
Saw this book on the shelf, 5/5/2000, in the alternate history sort of area. I checked it out. I was just looking at the pictures and the drawings, and I came across Edward Kunkel's pictures, and he had said it was used as some sort of pump. And so I reproduced that same model back in June of 1999. April 3rd, 2000, first try, it ran. Pushed the valve in once and it started running. Immediately what happened, the whole 500-pound block of cement and rock and rebar was pulsing. Boom, 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 boom. And the first thing that came to mind was exactly what Chris Gunn had written, that there was a pulse that was emanating from that room, but he knew the mechanism was in there. Immediately I knew, oh my God, Chris, you're right. I added a model with a glass top and a glass side. I used little ink jets, but I had little nozzles and valves on the side of it so I could determine all the fluid dynamics within the room. And I was absolutely shocked to find that it was a vortex in there. It was an extremely complex vortex. It had a heartbeat pulse at the time. And if you set it up a certain way, it actually does the pulse of a heart. It doesn't do a consistent, like 1 second per se. 1 second pulse is bump, bump, bump. It was actually doing strong in a short beat. Bump, 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 bump. Whatever it is, whoever designed this, that's what they wanted. And Chris was saying, I had just come up with the name of a book, and it had to do with the Great Pyramid, the heartbeat of a civilization.
I think the evidence is fairly clear that particularly in Egypt, and if you consider the system that they built at Giza, the pyramids at Giza, the Great Pyramid specifically, that they had developed an energy system that was harmonious. It was not only drawing energy from the earth, but it was harmonizing the plates and harmonizing the earth, and probably transmitting those frequencies throughout the planet. It's now become knowledge that these standing stones like at Stonehenge, at Karnak, that they actually do emit particular frequencies.
In Washington, John Cadman gave us a tour of his scale model pyramid pulse generator. This device works completely off a gravity feed, and no power is required. The implications of this technology are great, including energy and agricultural benefits.
If it was the Great Pyramid, this would be the moat around it. That'd be the water level of the moat. It was this, kind of a static water level. And then that's just being from that. Just down to here. So it just drops straight down in here. And then it's got the little room inside the cement casing. So it's pumping water right now over to the far side of the house, so about 400 feet away, and elevating it from here. And so this would be, in the Great Pyramid, this would be the dead end shaft here. This would be this shaft here, And this would be the shaft here. It would go down to the Nile, which would just have a very simple valve in it. And so if you shut this, it changes the pressure, and it'll change this rate and the intensity. Immediately. Whoever designed it, they used the back pressure to change the pulse rate and the frequency and the amplitude to tune it for the pyramid itself. For the variations in the atmospheric pressure plus the temperature of the water, because the temperature of the water changes the viscosity of the water, and that changes the speed of the sound wave traveling through the water. So you have to have a simple way to tune it, and all you have to do would be slightly close a valve or open a valve, and you can tune the whole frequency of the building just by, it'd be a very simple valve, like a little screw valve. And the pulse is what causes the engine to start running. It's for the King's Chamber. The King's Chamber is a freestanding, completely to crystal room because it's rose quartz granite. It's freestanding from the exterior limestone walls, and it's tuned. So when you cause that to resonate, the whole King's Chamber would resonate all by itself, and that would cause the machine to start running. This is technology that has been proven, that's been on this planet since before the end of the Ice Age. All the archaeological evidence points to that was pre-flood, and that was 12,000 years ago was the flood. Energized water would increase the health of the plants, which we eat, increase our health, which is not necessarily a bad thing. The size of the pyramid itself would do it to a scale which would affect essentially all the fish, the animals, the people, the plants of that whole area, or whole part of the globe, for free, forever. Nothing required other than let the water flow.
I'm streaming right now. What do you want? Yes.